Well, big welcome to everybody. And firstly, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people, the traditional custodians of the beautiful land on which I'm sitting actually today, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And it seems very appropriate to be introducing our next guest today on March for Justice Day. I first met Natalie at the end of last year, and that meeting has remained very front of mind with me. You're very much an igniting change person, Natalie. You don't accept the unacceptable. And you're an extremely fierce mother and founder of PartnerSpeak and CEO. And PartnerSpeak provides advocacy and peer support for partners and families of perpetrators of child abuse material. All the peer support is offered by fully trained individuals, all with lived experience of having an intimate partner or close family member involved in child sexual abuse material. And Natalie, I called you brave before last week, and you said, no, I'm not brave, I'm fierce, because I don't have any fear. And I just wonder whether you could share with us a little bit about PartnerSpeak and why you founded it. And again, welcome to you and everybody who's on this Zoom with us today.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you for tracking me down and tracking down all the change makers who are hard to find, because you and your team at Igniting Change also don't accept the unacceptable. And there are much sexier, easier agencies to support, but you go out of your way to find those of us dealing with the hard issues and those of us who are really grassroots without much. So thank you for the way that you do what you do also.
Thank you.
PartnerSpeak has had various iterations, but the very first one was in 2004. And in 2004 in Australia, we saw on the media a police operation called Operation Auxin. It was front page news, radio, television for at least 2 weeks. And in that operation, 200 Australian men had been charged with child abuse material. And at that time, none of us knew what that meant, including the magistrates. We all went, who's doing what on the internet? And we're really confused. But some people knew what that meant. And that was the intimate partners and close family members of these perpetrators. And back in 2004, when it was still news on my television set, because that's what happened in 2004, when I heard the breaking news at first, my initial response was to run out of the room, close the door, cry, and try not to vomit, because I just didn't want to know. And the reason that I didn't want to know is because that police operation, which took 18 months, happened in parallel. It was 18 months earlier that I had discovered my ex-husband had been involved in child abuse material. And at that time, only 18 months on, that trauma was very real and raw and new and causing a visceral response in me. But the thing that drew me back into the room was that multiple media sources named the wife of one of the perpetrators more than once, and more than one media source. And it was because the perpetrator and his wife co-owned childcare centres together. And no one said anything. No one in the media, no policymakers, no one stepped up and said, you can't name her. And if you think about what we've learned in terms of family violence and sexual assault, while we have a long way to go, that kind of naming by association just wouldn't happen. And it's the myth of collusion that she must have been in on it was so strong in 2004 that media and others just treated it as fact. If she was married to him, she must have known, she must have been in on it. And so it was that story that made me go, okay, Natalie, you have to do something about this. They're going to keep naming this woman and no one is going to stop them. So at that point, I unfurled myself from the fetal position and that was the very first steps of my advocacy in this area. And I rang some government departments and I rang some women's organisations, and I naively thought that I would ring up and say, hey, we have this cohort of families who are in trauma at the moment and that you haven't thought of. And I thought that they would say to me, thank you for letting us know. We will now expand our service delivery and help these people. And that didn't happen, which doesn't surprise me now. And one person, one of the gatekeepers who wouldn't put me through on a phone call, said a sentence that changed my life and the life of thousands of people that PartnerSpeak has now gone on to help. She said, we won't do anything, but if you start something, let us know. And that's when I realized, oh, I have to start something. And so the start of PartnerSpeak was very humble. It was an online forum, which we still have to this day. And fortunately for me, I had a friend who ran a peer support forum around another issue. She came over, helped me set it up. And for about 10 years, if someone happened to stumble across that forum, they found me and I wrote back. And that's how we went for many years. And for most of the people, for a lot of people who come to PartnerSpeak, their experience is something like this. They're very often, or about 50% of the time, a perpetrator of online child sexual abuse material has an intimate partner and has children. And so when half a dozen plainclothes detectives turn up in the family home, that's when his intimate partner and children find out for the first time that he has been offending against children in this way. And in that, law enforcement need to arrive at a time that they know people are going to be home. So it might be 7 o'clock in the morning, and the perpetrator's partner will be getting kids ready for school, packing lunches. A number of people have talked about, I was in the shower getting ready for the day. And detectives start taking all the computers and phones and kids' playstations, any telecommunications device. And that is most often the first time that the non-offending partner learns what their loved one has been up to. And as you can imagine, the world is just pulled out from underneath this family on that day. Mm-hmm. And that is a common way to learn, but also some partners find the material themselves, which is distressing in a different, however it's discovered is distressing. And there are just different elements to the stories that bring people to PartnerSpeak. And I was going to tell you about this particular woman's story, but instead I'd just like to share with you a couple of minutes in her own words. And the content advice, everything that I'm talking about today is distressing, whether we have this lived experience or a related lived experience, or if we are a human being hearing about this story, these stories, and these few words that I'm about to share are quite impactful, and it goes for about 2 minutes. May I share that now?
Yeah, please do. Thank you. That's entirely sad.
Child sexual exploitation. Not only did I see him engaging in masturbating, I also saw a guy who was going to be the person sexually exploiting the child, and I also saw the child. I couldn't move. I sat in a chair. He did not bat an eyelid. That's the most horrific part of discovering that someone is not the person that you thought they were is the ease and calm with which this man was able to go from directing his child's sexual exploitative fantasy and communicating with those who were going to commit the abuse for him while he masturbated, the ease with which he then just flicked the TV back onto the Tour de France. I sat for 40 minutes. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I actually physically couldn't do a bowel movement for almost a week. And I thought I was going to die from that, let alone anything else. All of a sudden, this man was not somebody I knew or somebody I trusted, but I honestly could not even process what I had seen. I could not process the consequences of a human being that actually does engage in this, let alone the enormity of how and where would I even begin to, who do I even tell this to? Please, Kate.
Are you there, Natalie?
Yes.
Difference has been huge. I was able to.
That, I mean, well, you can see I'm kind of lost for words, but also I know that huge numbers of people that you're in touch with. How many people are you in touch with as an organisation at the moment, and how has how did COVID impact on that?
So I said that PartnerSpeak started with the online peer support forum. We now have a bunch of other offerings, including a helpline, the peer support groups. We go with people to police stations, etc. On our peer support forum alone, we have around 800 active, genuine users, and that's getting rid of the spam bots and all of that. And we have over 100 posts a month. And the forum is actually something that we don't receive any funding for, even though it's that active. And in terms of COVID, in the second half of last year, we delivered 400% on what we're contracted to deliver. So we're supposed to, we're funded to support, this is excluding the forum and those 800 people. We're funded to support 40 people a year. And in the second half of last year, we provided support to 120. And I just, if I may, I wanted to pop back to that, the story I shared a snippet of, and I'll be brief. But after that trauma, that woman said, and so many of the people that we support, that the discovery of what they've found out is so horrific and like nothing we can imagine. But what is even more traumatic than the discovery is how everybody around them responds. And so that person that we heard from, her children were actually bullied and taunted after it came out what their father had done. And another woman who we supported last year, she actually requested a suppression order from court to protect her children and was denied because she wasn't a victim. And in the end, there were multiple media articles that named the perpetrator, where he worked, the suburb they lived, and a close-knit community that they were part of. And people did put, so they didn't name her or her children, but their community put two and two together. And her children lost their best friends because the parents said, no, you can't be friends with this family anymore. And this woman's elderly parents received hate phone calls about the offence. And so when we talk about the need for PartnerSpeak, there's the horror of learning about the offence and life being turned upside down, but it's then the aftermath of how everybody responds. And so during COVID, one of the things that happened is people in Victoria, of course, were in lockdown, and often sentencing takes quite a while. So non-offending partners and their children were stuck in lockdown with the perpetrator and couldn't even call us. And so this is one of the beautiful things about small, innovative grassroots organisations. I think within 2 weeks of lockdown, with our extraordinary resources at our fingertips, we launched a web chat so that people could discreetly message us on their phones, and they sat in their cars doing it, or they did it on their breaks at work. And one story really sits with me was a shift worker, and she left so she was stuck at home with the perpetrator and the kids all day, left home to go to work because she was an essential worker, left web chat open at work, would run and do what she needed to do, and then would come back and pick up the web chat whenever she had a minute with the peer support worker. So during COVID, the crime type escalated enormously, and then the affected family members were trapped in the house with the perpetrators.
Gosh, I think everybody on this Zoom will realise why, when we met Natalie here at Igniting Change, and she explained that their funding was very precarious, why we immediately wanted to support her. Now, we don't have huge resources, but I was very proud that our board did it very quickly. And I was amazed that you didn't have funders really knocking on your door, because what you're doing is so important. And on that, I mean, a couple of questions really. What are your major challenges right now, and what messages might all of us who are on this Zoom call with you, might we share to ignite more conversations about this very pressing issue?
Thank you, Jane. One of my biggest issues is that we're a Victorian agency, and sometimes you need to have a dark sense of humour to stay in these spaces. So I joke that's because child abuse material is only a problem in Victoria and nowhere else. Obviously, that's not the case, and so I have police in every state desperate to refer affected families to PartnerSpeak, and law enforcement are some of the people who get the impact without thinking about it, because they've come to me and talked about the distress of leaving a woman and her children at home, turning their lives upside down. And so at the moment, we're only funded in Victoria, and obviously there is demand throughout the country from the families themselves, and also from agencies who are just desperate to refer to us. Where, as I said, we don't get funding for our forum, which I think, because it's an online forum rather than like a phone call or a support group, there's a risk that the impact of a forum can be minimized. But actually, the forum is really important. When I go into the back end of it, which makes me sound a whole lot more technically accomplished than I am, but let's just roll with that for 2 minutes. I can see how people behave when they're on the forum, and often the first time that they land, they spend hours reading and reading and reading other people's stories. And so some of those people may not be able to call up and say, this happened to me, but they are connecting and they are receiving peer support, and they are hearing other people's stories by reading on the forum. Or sometimes the forum, once they've spent some time in the forum, and if they've had the courage to post and ask a question, that might give them the courage and the confidence to trust our organisation and our community, and to reach out in another way. And so the volume of users on the forum and how we support that is definitely a challenge. And the fact that we're only a Victorian agency and that there is demand and need nationally. And when someone rings up the peer line from Queensland and says, can I meet someone here? Is there a group nearby? It's really hard for us to answer that question. In terms of what people in the room can do, and thank you very much for prioritising this time to have a really uncomfortable conversation. You put your hand up and said, I'm willing to sit and listen to something horrific. So thank you for doing that. You know, in different crime types and forms of abuse, there's different strong myths that really take hold. And I guess this is really fitting on the March for Women today. So we know in sexual assault, it's what was she wearing and why was she in that park on her own? And we know in family violence, it's why doesn't she leave? And in this space, it's how did she not know? And what I would, and that is when I said there's the impact of the crime and then there's the impact of how everyone responds, it's the power of that myth that makes how everyone responds so distressing. And most people I speak to about my work, and if it can be seasoned domestic violence workers who've been in their sector for over 30 years, when they hear me present, and is probably the case for people in the audience today, it's often the first time that they've thought about the intimate partner and the family of the perpetrators. So I would love it. And that's understandable, because in the media, we read about the perpetrator and the impact of the offence, and unprompted, why would we think, oh, I wonder if he has a partner and kids? So I'm your prompt for that. And I would love it next time you see online child sexual abuse material mentioned in the media or on social media, that you have a conversation with someone and say, did you know that half of these guys have partners and kids and that they experience significant trauma? My number one goal for PartnerSpeak is that within 24 hours of arrest or warrant of a perpetrator anywhere in Australia, that the non-offending partner and other close family members know about PartnerSpeak. And so that's where spreading the word, spreading awareness, having the conversation about what you heard today is really powerful. It might be sharing one of our Facebook posts, coming to our AGM, or when you get home today, or catching up with people during the week. Hey, I heard this talk, and did you know? And maybe you would like to like their Facebook page and keep in touch with what they're doing. And a final thing that we can be aware of and we can advocate for is people who are gathered care about social justice and social change, and therefore know that language is really important, and have probably picked up on the language that Jane and I have been using this morning. And so it's really important that we call child sexual abuse material or child abuse material what it is. It's not child pornography. There's any child abuse material is a child who has been sexually abused and recorded. And when I started this work back in 2004, and it still happens, sometimes it's minimized, like he was just looking. And we know that if he was accessing material and wasn't involved in production, that he has created a demand for those children to be raped and filmed in a particular way. And then when we go back to that story that I played you near the beginning, that live produced child abuse material is one of the fastest growing areas of child abuse material in Australia and in the world. And so when we have perpetrators directing their own abuse, it just gives us more clarity. Not that we here need that, but when talking to others, to push back against the he was just looking. And there's even an argument that if he was looking online, maybe that will stop him from abusing real children, but these are real children. So there are some messages that I would love help in spreading. And if you see a news article that says child pornography, quick comment on their Facebook page would be super helpful.
You are an extraordinary woman, Natalie, and you are fierce, and igniting change is absolutely passionate about walking alongside you and ensuring that within 24 hours a non-offending partner will know about PartnerSpeak. It's just so important. Now, I know you'd like to share another couple of minutes. Would you?
Yeah.
And I'll come back to you.
Sure. I wanted to share, some people will be sitting in their seats looking a bit shell-shocked right now, which is to be expected, because this is a horrific thing to think about. And often actually, I'm asked, how do I stay in this space? And our peer support workers are asked, how do we stay in this space? And of the video I've been sharing snippets with you from, the bit that actually made me cry is the bit that follows. Is I know how horrific the pain is. I'm very familiar with that. And the closing, when the non-offending partners shared with us and are about to share with you the impact of what being connected with PartnerSpeak has meant, really shows the power. Jane really emphasised in the beginning that everybody who offers support at PartnerSpeak has this lived experience of being an intimate partner of a perpetrator of child abuse material. And almost ubiquitously, everyone who contacts us mentions that. When I rang PartnerSpeak, the person who answered the phone had been through what I went through. They understood, and that connection is like no other connection. So I'm going to give our little hearts a little break and share with you some of the hope and the huge impact that our lived experience through peer support and PartnerSpeak makes. Thank you. As soon as my technology allows.
Speak to someone within 30 minutes of being told by my ex-partner, who was the first person that I told that this was going on. And I was inconsolable. And she calmed me down, and she made me feel like I had agency in this huge issue that was now in my life that I hadn't caused. Then being able to come to a support group and hearing other women talking about their experiences, and being in this weird time on Zoom, but silently screaming in the thing, going, yes, 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 that is exactly what it's like. And it was the first time that I felt heard, and I felt vindicated, and I didn't feel alone in my experience.
For me personally, it has changed my life. Within minutes of the first phone conversation, I felt like this massive lift had been lifted from my shoulders. I spoke with the peer support worker, who not only was amazing and supportive, but had lived experiences, not exactly like mine, but similar. I felt like I wasn't alone anymore, and that feeling of loneliness was something I had been carrying for many, many years. I didn't feel misunderstood anymore. I finally felt like someone was listening, but actually and could completely understand how this had changed me as a person, how much it hurt, how confronting and violating it was, and how it still feels to this day. That's how it's changed my life.
that's what PartnerSpeak gave me 15 years after the experience, as well as the gift of being able to become a peer support worker, which is a huge honour from my point of view, and a gift every day for me that I get to do this work.
Gosh, Natalie, it's hard to know how to close this session. I have so much admiration for you. As you know, lived experience is a very important part of igniting change as well in the projects that we support. We look forward to growing our relationship with you and spending more time with you and introducing you to more members of our family in person. And just a thank you for creating the time to be with us. Thank you for being the fierce woman you are. And I know that each and every one of us on this call will be sharing what we've learned today with you. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you for prioritising the tricky, dark places.
Thank you. That's very generous. Thanks. Bye.